This has to be my most requested point system ever. I simulated 10 seasons in F1 25, but the points are reversed. So if you're wondering how this works, it's quite simple really. The last finishing car gets 25 points, with the points trickling down to the 10th last finisher. So if we had 19 drivers finishing the race, 19th place would get 25 points, all the way up to 10th place who'd get the last point. Got it? Good. This video was a very odd one, and so I hope you like it. But if you do go on to enjoy it, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're going for 20k by the end of the year, and every subscription really goes a long way. Oh yeah, and join the Discord. Links below. But without further ado, let's get into the most anticipated point system I've ever covered. So, Season 1, we've got the drivers at the back that you would expect. The Verstappens, the Leclercs, the Russells. So moving into the top 10, we've got the Williams who are perfectly in the middle of everything, and then after that, it gets a lot closer. I should probably mention that we're going to count a win as the driver who finishes last, and then the podiums will count for drivers that finish second and third last. So we've got Stroll all the way up in 5th, and Lawson just 10 points behind. In 4th, it's Bortoleto with 284 points and just 1 win, 15 points behind Behrman in 3rd. So in Season 1, we've got a shootout between Doohan and Hadjar for the title of our first champion. But it wasn't even close because Hadjar dominated Season 1, getting 11 wins and 20 podiums on the way to his first title. And because of this, he single-handedly carried VCarb all the way to the Constructors title, with them finishing over 250 points ahead of Alpine in 2nd. So get used to the order here because we're going to be seeing VCarb, Alpine, Sauber and Haas dominating. But now it's time to move on to the moves, relevant to the championship or not. There will be a lot of moves in Season 1, and Alonso gets us started by being dropped by Aston Martin, and he was replaced by Esteban Ocon. Ouch. Aaron would go to Haas in turn. Hamilton would retire at Ferrari despite beating his teammate, and Verstappen would replace him at the Scuderia. Another ouch. Norris headed to Red Bull, Gasly moved to McLaren, Hülkenberg joined Alpine, and Solov joined the grid with Sauber. And finally, Leclerc would go to Mercedes, Sainz went back to Ferrari, and Antonelli would go to Williams. A good first season, I'd say. Now let's move to Season 2. So we got the usual suspects at the back of the grid, and in fact, the bottom 3 teams all got 1 point, with Russell coming out on top. But into the meaningful results, the Alpines have fallen down the order as Doohan goes from runner-up to 8th place. Lawson and Behrman have also dropped a bit as Stroll stays put in 5th. In 4th, we have Aaron in his debut season, but he's far off the top 3 because it's Bortoleto in 3rd with 359 points, 4 wins and 15 podiums. This leaves us with Hadjar against Solov. Once again, a fight between 2 different constructors. But once again, it wasn't that close because the Bulgarian would come out on top by almost 100 points, taking 8 wins and 21 podiums in the process. Sauber break the 800 point mark, and VCarb and Haas were close in 2nd and 3rd. Apart from Alpine dropping from 2nd to 5th in the standings, there's not much else to talk about here, so let's move on to the moves. So after 1 season away, Leclerc would return to Ferrari as he would seat swap with Sainz. At Haas, Aaron would be dropped and replaced by Doohan, leading Ocon to return to Alpine. And finally, Antonelli went to Aston Martin as Maloney joined the grid with Williams. So let's see how Season 3 goes. In the battle at the back of the grid, the 4 teams scored a lot more points than last year, and Mercedes would come out on top. Moving into the top 10, Williams are starting to climb here and Alpine continue to drop, and Stroll has also dropped off from his 5th place finishes. Haas have a good pair of drivers in 5th and 6th as they were separated by just 5 points. But the top 4 consists of 2 constructors with both of their drivers here, so let's see who comes out on top. In 4th, we have Bortoleto. In 3rd, it's Lawson, who's back up at the top. And in 2nd, it's Solov because Hadjar retakes his spot at the top of F1. Or should I say bottom. VCarb get back on top by over 140 points thanks to Hadjar getting so many points. And Haas are a distant 3rd with Williams now up to 5th. So we move on to the transfers for Season 4 and we start at VCarb where Hadjar would be dropped in favour of Zach O'Sullivan. I guess VCarb didn't like that one of their drivers was dominating a championship meant for teams at the back and got rid of him. And for some reason no one elected to pick him up, I wonder why. On to the rest of the moves, Hülkenberg would retire from the sport, with Solov moving teams to Alpine, and Aaron came back to the sport with Sauber. Sainz would seat swap with Tsunoda, and Antonelli joined Mercedes as Colapinto completed the grid by moving to Aston Martin. So let's see who wins out in Season 4 with Hadjar now off the grid. So the order hasn't changed too much in the bottom 10, so let's move into the top 10. Haas have fallen off quite a lot from the first season, and Behrman was all the way down in 9th. Stroll stays in 7th despite Doohan ahead of him getting no wins, and Aaron returns to the sport with a 5th place finish. In 4th, 20 points ahead, it's Lawson, and just 4 points ahead of him is Bortoleto in 3rd. This guy's never going to win a title, is he? So, with Hajar gone, we've now got his replacement against one-time winner Solov. So, how close was this one going to be? Well, it was actually quite close, with the top two being separated by 45 points. And the winner would be Solov for the second time as he beat O'Sullivan to his first title thanks to his 2 extra wins. It was close in the constructors, so much so that Alpine and Sauber were tied on 536 points, with the French team edging ahead thanks to Solov getting more wins than their whole team combined. And in the lower positions, McLaren, Red Bull and Ferrari were incredibly close again. But with all that said, now it's time for the moves. So we start at Aston Martin, where Stroll would be getting dropped after a few disappointing seasons, with Behrman going there and Marty joining Haas. And at Alpine, Ocon would be dropped by the team for the second time in his life, with O'Sullivan pairing up with his title rival from Season 4, with Crawford joining the grid with VCarb. Season 5 has our typical faces, but the top 10 is looking a bit different. That's because the Saubers have dropped off. Bortoleto has been in the top 4 for seemingly the entire sim, and now he's in 9th. Haas have improved however, and this opens up new spots for new drivers and teams. The jump from 5th to 4th is a big one, and we got Lawson in 4th with 311 points. This leaves us with his teammate and the 2 Alpines to fight for the title. And to be honest, it was actually pretty close. We start in 3rd, and it's the first of the Alpine drivers, Zach O'Sullivan. He only got 2 wins but got 13 podiums on his way to 3rd in the championship. He would be 31 points behind 2nd place, and that would be Jack Crawford, as he was another 29 points behind our Season 5 winner Nikola Zolov. This guy is really starting to take over in this sport. It was a hotly contested spot for number 1 in the team's championship, as Alpine take home the honours after finishing 53 points ahead of VCarb. And with that, let's move over to the transfers. So we start at Red Bull, where Carlos Sainz would be dropped in favour of Piastri. Russell was headed to McLaren in turn, and Bortoleto joined Mercedes with our 3-time champion Solov replacing him at Sauber and returning to the team where he won his first title. Verschoor would go to Alpine to replace the Bulgarian, and finally, Lawson would be dropped by VCarb, with Martins joining the backmarker team. I guess they were unimpressed with Liam not winning them this championship. And with that, let's move to Season 6. Starting off in the bottom 10, we've got 2 Aston Martins in here and obviously both Williams, but we're actually missing a Mercedes, and that's because Bortoleto could not stay away from this championship for long and ended up in 9th, which all but confirms Mercedes to be the best of the good teams. Moving up, Haas have dropped a few places and Aaron is 6th once again, but has a lot more points than last year. Dropping down to 5th is O'Sullivan after having an impressive Season 5. He's nowhere near those heights here though, as the championship is well over 100 points away. And that takes us into the top 4. Starting us off is a bit of a surprise, but it's Solov in 4th. Our most successful driver is down in 4th, but it's actually not that far off the championship leader, who has 362 points. In 3rd, it's Richard Verschoor, who's chilling in the middle of 4th and 2nd in terms of points and positions, but that leaves us with the 2 VCarb drivers to fight it out for the title. They were separated by just 13 points in the end, and it was a hard fought title, but Victor Martins would be our Season 6 champion in his rookie year. This obviously means VCarb dominating the team standings, but behind them in 2nd, it's much closer as Sauber narrowly miss out on 2nd spot, 18 points behind Alpine. But that's all to see here. Now let's move on to the moves. There weren't many this time around, but we get started at Alpine as Zach O'Sullivan will be dropped, leading Paul Aaron to go to Alpine and Tim Tramnitz to join the grid with Sauber. Not too much has changed at the back in Season 7, apart from Bortoleto kind of going back to where he belongs in the bottom 10. However, he has 39 points while his teammate has 0, so he's not doing great at his new team. But someone who's doing even worse is Sonoda. What are you doing in 10th place, Yuki? In 7th and 8th, we've got the Haas cars, and then in the next 2 spots, it's the 2 Saubers. They scored good points, but they don't hold a candle to the teams ahead of them. Starting in 4th, we have Paul Aaron with a nice 304 points, but 88 ahead of him would be his teammate who doubled his win count and wasn't too far off from a title himself. So once again, we've got the VCarbs fighting out for the title, and once again, it was hella close. But once again, it would be Martins edging ahead of Crawford to claim his 2nd title and another constructors title for the team. We've got a very nice and satisfying looking top 10 here, and let me direct your eyes to the team standings. Aston Martin have finished 5th in the constructors despite not even getting 100 points, and Ferrari have jumped Williams. This is entirely down to Yuki though, because what in the Sergio Perez is that point split between teammates? But with that, let's see if Sushi Tsunoda is getting dropped or not. Well, he wouldn't be dropped as such, but instead seat swap with Ollie Behrman at Aston Martin. Martin. Elsewhere on the grid, Aaron would be dropped after just one season at Alpine. Wouldn't have it any other way. In his place would come Enzo Fittipaldi. Piastri would be dropped by Red Bull with Bortoleto jumping ship to that team, and Colapinto would go to Mercedes in turn, with Albon joining Aston Martin and O'Sullivan returning to the grid with Williams. So let's see if Ollie Behrman will be any better than Yuki for Ferrari in Season 8. Well, I can already see him, so that's not a good sign. At least Yuki was only 10th. But Colapinto and Bortoleto have adjusted well to their new teams, and shout out to Maloney, he's clearly doing very well in the Real Championship. But hey look, there's Tsunoda in 10th. I almost missed him because I'm too busy staring at Ollie Behrman in 9th for Ferrari. Man, what are you doing that far up the grid when Leclerc is down in 18th with 3 points? Anyway, we've once again got the Sauber and Haas cars in formation from 5th down to 8th, and in the same order, only doing a swap with Marty, so it isn't actually the same order. Into the top 4, Crawford gets us started as he drops from 2nd, where he's been for the last few seasons, down to 4th. But he wasn't too far off the title and actually got the same wins and podiums as 3rd place, which was Richard Verschoor. So that leaves us with rookie Fittipaldi and 2-time champion Martins to fight for the title. And thanks to just 9 extra points, Enzo takes a rookie title and helps get Alpine back on top in the championship. Ferrari is still ahead of Williams somehow, and the order hasn't changed much, so let's move into the moves. After a few seasons now and no title to show for it, VCarb had lost patience with Crawford and decided to drop him, bringing in rookie Taylor Barnard to replace him. O'Sullivan would also be dropped after doing a bit too well for Williams and was replaced by Marty. Solov would go to Haas in turn, and Lawson returned to the grid with Sauber. Norris and Behrman would do a seat swap because Red Bull for some reason wanted Perez V2, and finally at Aston Martin, Tsunoda would retire from F1 and Doohan went there, being replaced at Haas by Ocon. Let's move to Season 9. This season's driver that is doing a bit too well considering their machinery actually has a few candidates. Firstly, in the bottom 10, we've got Colapinto, who's got 82 points, while Antonelli won the real title and got 0. And considering he got no wins and no podiums, this guy was consistently at the back. But now we move into the top 10, and this is a sight to behold. Check out who's in P9. Gasly! We haven't even heard about this guy since like season 1, and now he's in the top 10 getting 2 wins for McLaren as his teammate got just 6. So at least we know who's winning the fight at the back this year. Moving on from this, we've once again got the Saubers in 5th and 6th and the Haas cars in 7th and 8th, and former titan of the sport Solov is now just a midfield runner in the semi-decent Haas. So that leaves us with the Alpines and V-Carbs to fight for the title once again. Starting in 4th, we have another former champion as Martins has finally been beaten by a teammate and is now down in 4th place. In 3rd, we've got a regular finisher here as Verschoor is 3rd, and so that leaves us with newcomer Barnard to fight the defending champion Fittipaldi. And while the gap between them wasn't massive at just 49 points, Enzo held on to claim his 2nd title in the sport and got Alpine across the line in their fight with VCarb. The top 3 is the same as always, so let's move on to the final transfer section of the video. We start at McLaren and Red Bull as Russell and Bortoleto would seat swap, and at VCarb, Martins would be getting dropped after a poor season that cost them the constructors and was replaced by Paul Aaron. And finally, Doohan and Marty would seat swap, completing the grid for Season 10. So let's see who's going to take the victory in the final year. So Gasly has fallen down the order a bit, but 65 points compared to his teammate 6 is a bit suspect. But trust me, there's worse to come. Solov is a very low 10th for Haas, and into the top 10, set your eyes upon 8th place. Colapinto, what are you doing? Only one podium shows us that this was consistency, not a few lucky results. What are you doing that high, man? But let's move on, because for the first time in a few years, the Haas and Sauber lock on 5th down to 8th has been broken. Now Ocon is in 6th and splits the Saubers. But they are all well off the top 4 who are just in their own league. We start at 4th place because it's Barnard, just 4 points behind his teammate. So it seems that VCarb finally found their driver pair, but they weren't good enough to take the top spot because someone from Alpine was going to do it instead. So was it going to be Fittipaldi for the 3rd time in a row, or Richard Verschoor? It was Fittipaldi. He cleaned up pretty heavily and finished 55 points ahead of Verschoor, helping Alpine dominate in the standings. So that was the reversed points in the F1 game. I hope it didn't disappoint. But I have actually made tables for every F1 season in real life using this point system, and it would make for a good video. So if you'd like that video, let me know below and check out what happened when I made it so first would get disqualified every race.